Hi, so the new Affinity has meshes. If you don't know what a mesh is, let's take a look at that. I'm just going to draw a rectangle and then we're going to take the gradient tool and then we need to apply that. I'm going to first set this to none and then let's select mesh from this and then we get a mesh. And you see this is kind of a grid, and where the lines cross, you can select that node and then apply a color. You can go to the swatches and just apply a swatch, or you can do that just by mixing a color and then also select a couple of them and apply the same color to that. And then when you have a couple of different colors here, then what this is doing, you can move these around and you can also grab those handles and then move them and use this to make the color flow in this rectangle, just like that. And the closer they are together, the harder the gradient inside or between them will be. That's how you use them. Now, in order to understand how they work, and maybe you have been using either Illustrator or Inkscape before, let's take a look at how the two handle them, because there are different ways of handling meshes. Let's take a look at Illustrator. So here I've drawn the shape of a banana, and in order to get a gradient mesh, what you can do is take the mesh tool and just click in this. What you get is a mesh that is not very well suited for the task because it does not go from here to there. So as you have seen, a mesh is kind of organized or built like a table. So it always has four corners, and Illustrator has put them here and there and maybe somewhere up there. So it's not very well organized, and you want to have that set up differently. But first, let's take a look at how it works. So if I move the outer one, then I also change the shape of the mesh. And therefore, you can do a very handy trick. So let's undo this. And here we've got the shape again. And I want to have those corners here, here, there, and there. And I'm selecting all those corners, and then you can also go to Object, Create Gradient Mesh, and let's make fewer rows and columns because that's always better. And you get these organized in just the way you need in order to get a pretty decent banana. I have already drawn a lot of bananas with gradient meshes, so let's take a look at that. So that's what you can do. Let's zoom into this. I'm going to select that. So that's what you would need in order to build that banana. And there are different colors and they are assigned to where those lines cross. And the outside of this is the outer border of the banana. Let's take a look at Inkscape because it has a different approach to that. So here's the shape, and then I can select that, and then we have a gradient mesh tool. And with the gradient mesh tool, you can choose between a rectangular version of that gradient mesh or a radial or a conical gradient version of that. So let's do that. I'm going to first create this, and then let's go to the mesh tool and choose this one here. And then in the fill and stroke, you can assign that using mesh gradient, and then you get that circular. What's happening here is not a different kind of gradient mesh. It's just organized differently. So when you pull these apart, then you see what it's doing is it's just taking this table-like thing and just having it flow around in a circle. So that's what's happening here. It's a table anyway, but it's just dragged around like in a circle, so that when you drag that apart, you get the four corners, this one, this one, this one, and that one. So that's it. But what you also see when I'm going to the selection tool, then you see that this original shape, that rectangle, is a clipping mask applied to that gradient. So it's actually a real fill inside of that. So if you change that rectangle, then you are clipping that mesh. And the same happens when you apply that to this one here. I'm going to switch here and then apply that. And you see we've got that rectangular thing. And what you would need to do in order to get the suitable mesh, you would need to move these around and get them into the shape that you need. So you move these around and you move that one around up to the top and move these closer together and then move these around and rotate these, bring these in shape and just like that. So you move them so that you get mesh lines that help you build the banana. That's the important thing. And now when you add more of those lines, because you will need more, then those will match what you have already built. So we can add more by double clicking on those lines and you see they adjust to what's already there and then you use that to build the banana. And let's just go to the next window where I have built that. So if we select that mesh tool, then you see we have this banana here and I'm going to zoom in so you see again it's the same principle. You apply colors to where the lines cross. Now let's go to Affinity and again let's select this shape and let's select the gradient tool and then you can up here go to mesh and you see you got basically the same thing like in Inkscape where the shape that I've drawn, the banana, is a mask for the actual mesh like that. So again, like in Inkscape, you have to move them around and make them fit your shape so that you get the mesh grid lines running through the banana like that. Now we've got gradient meshes in all three of the apps, but here comes the bad thing. You cannot go with the gradient mesh from here to there and continue editing. You also cannot use all the gradient meshes you have created in the past and edit them with Affinity. There would be 3 file formats that could be suitable for that. Those are SVG, PDF, and EPS. And let's take a look at all 3 of them and what works and what doesn't. And I'm going to start in Illustrator and I'm going to save this as a PDF. And let's save this without Illustrator editing capabilities so that I can just open that. And I'm first going to close it and just open this again and save this as an EPS like this. And here I'm going to save it as Illustrator 8. Now 3 would just be the plain EPS, which doesn't support gradient meshes, but 8 does. So let's just do that. We will get a surprising result with that. I can just disclose so much. And now, first of all, we are going to open that PDF. Here's my PDF and I'm going to open that. And you see an unknown imaging construct was encountered. So something that PDF doesn't natively support. And we can see that in the layers panel. It's inside of a clipping group. Here's our non-native art. So that just tells us, well, it's not supported. Most of the time it stays vector if it has been created in a vector app, but it's just no longer editable at all. So let's close that. Let's go to Affinity with that. And first of all, I'm going to open that PDF. And you see, not even that works. But what we can do is just create a new document and then place it. So we can place the mesh, but of course, as you know, as is always the case when you're placing something, you cannot edit that at all. So that's not possible. The funny thing is what happens when we open that EPS. So here it is. And as you can already see, there might be a lot of pieces inside of that. So here we see a lot of anti-aliasing going on, and I can select single pieces. So obviously that has been separated and is forming a jigsaw puzzle. We have some hope now with SVG. So here I am in Inkscape, and we have this mesh, and I'm going to save it as a plain SVG, so a standard SVG file. Let's take a look at that. And in order to take a look at that, I'm going to open it in TextEdit because SVG is humanly readable. And you see inside of here, we have a mesh gradient object and everything looks really readable. We have paths that are defined and colors. So SVG natively supports mesh gradients. Nice. But if I just hit the spacebar in order to get Mac Quick Look, I can't see anything. So the receiving end of this file doesn't support it, really. And it's not even happening in browsers. And also neither Illustrator nor Affinity do support that. So let's go into Illustrator and let's open this. And when we take a look into the layers panel, then you see inside of here, we've got the mesh gradient object actually, but there's nothing in it. So Illustrator cannot read the rest. It can just see that object. And let's also take a look at that in Affinity. And I'm going to open that and you see same thing. We don't see anything. It cannot interpret that mesh gradient object. But also if we take a look at Illustrator and open that banana and let's save this as an SVG, and then let's open that in TextEdit, and in here you see Illustrator does not support saving that mesh gradient, it just saves an image. So here we've got an image and there's the content of the banana. That's how it currently works. Either it's not supported in the format or the format is not readable in the app.